Yeah, it's my pleasure to announce our next conference block. So we started off today with monetary experiments, and now we are entering the second and largest block of this conference, and this is all about creating new economies for arts and culture. And I'm super happy to announce our next speakers. We have Yael Sherill here, and she's a colleague I have been working with quite a lot over the past years. We've also done events together. And Yael is, I think, one of the best people to really to explore that realm between artistic production, cultural policy making, and this entire space of decentralized organizing. So therefore, I'm extremely happy to be having you here, Yael. And with you is Eric Bordelot. Some of you might know him from School of Disobedience at the Volksbühne in Berlin and many other super inspiring projects he's part of. Today, Eric will later on in the second half of this slot will introduce us to his current project, The Sphere, which is also an amazing and inspirational endeavor because it combines circus and finance. So two of the things you would rather not really put together in your mind, but that's also something we talked about yesterday, right? This is all about rebuilding our imagination when we want to rebuild our economy. So I leave the floor to you and have fun, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Ella. Maybe I'm just going to say that in this session, Eric and I will present together, and we'll be joined by Janina Benduski at the second part of the event, but it was published differently on the website, so just so everybody knows. I want to start by thanking MoneyLab.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I just need to jump in once again because
yes,
I completely
please.
forgot to introduce Robin Hotz. And I have to, because Robin is the person who created the wonderful artwork around MoneyLab. And I'm so sorry. I didn't really think about it properly. But of course, Robin needs to be introduced. Thanks again, Robin, for giving us this wonderful graphics. And today you will also be here for this session, and we'll see some of your work as the session proceeds. So I shut up now, and I leave it up to you. Bye-bye.
All right. So I want to start by thanking MoneyLab, Supermarket and Ella Kagel, not only for bringing this amazing series of conversations to life, but also cultivating an ecosystem characterized by care. In the preparation for this session, we felt we needed to shortly introduce the field of publicly funded art before we dive into the subject of digital tools for participatory governance, since, as Ruth and Ella mentioned yesterday in their opening conversation, the technology is not yet sophisticated enough to facilitate the complexities we deal with in this field. And so this presentation ended up having 4 parts. I will start with a problematization of publicly funded cultural work, followed by Eric Bordelot, who will explore imaginaries of ecologies of cultural funding that raise up to the challenges of the age of the Anthropocene. We will then have a conversation with Janina Benduski, member of the board of LAFT, a prominent Berlin association advocating for cultural policy for the independent performing arts. And then we will open the space for inputs from everyone, everyone who is joining us today. Sorry. Our conversation will be followed by a short break and then a session in which we will dive into a project called The Sphere, which aims to facilitate processes of self-organization and initiating new funding strategies for circus arts in Europe and beyond, joined by the initiators of the project, which are actually partly also present here with us in this session. And so I jump right in. I'm an independent curator based in Berlin, working in the field of public art. My motivation to work on this subject is intrinsic. I belong to the sector usually referred to as the independent art scene, which perhaps should more appropriately be titled interdependent, or maybe even dependent art scene, as these are values fundamental to our work. The sector is characterized by collaborative practices, producing non-commercial art, very often producing work which falls outside of the existing frameworks for intellectual property law, and are more often than not disinterested in establishing new forms of proprietary ownership structures. It is also a sector that is still sometimes partially supported by public funding, while usually having other sources of income and day jobs. Cultural workers in our sector write grant applications many times a year. These applications, and thereby the individuals writing them, are being regularly evaluated and allowed or restricted from participating in the cultural playing field. I want to quickly share my screen. Just a second. And now you will see my text and this. This is a copy of a quote from a colleague published about 2 weeks ago at 5:49 in the morning. And this colleague just shared her impression of the last round of applications for scholarship for visual artists this year from the Berlin Senate. And she mentions that only 2.5%, 11 out of 452 applicants have been chosen. And she finishes with the sentence, the whole life is a game. And so insider conversations regularly revolve around the individual private frustration with insufficient funds, intransparency in the allocation procedures, the unpaid labor of grant writing, discrimination, stagnant hierarchies, and disbalanced distribution of resources. While these are all urgent matters, they seem to be symptoms of an underlying pathology. The far-reaching effects the mechanism of allocation of public funds have on the social fabric of the cultural sector are less often publicly discussed. The system, in its current design, contributes to the already existing social fragmentation. It enforces a social scarcity where there is none. The repercussions of the grant allocation machine expands far beyond the private and public and economic realms into the social and psychological, undermining the sense of belonging, collaboration, and commoning. These have been elemental values held by the majority of independent art movements of the 20th century, which are the legacy of today's independent art scene. These values have been articulated in artists' manifestos, from the surrealists through the situationists, all the way to more recent Occupy Museums movement, And although precarity is the one most commonly cited problem in the art sector, though I personally don't believe it's worse than in other sectors, the dwindling sense of solidarity among practitioners, as well as isolation and unhealthy competition, are urgent matters that need to be addressed. The cultural sector is fragmented, which makes individuals less resilient. The manner in which the system is currently designed undermines the political incorporation of the art commons. We need to urgently ask the question, what kind of artistic knowledge flourishes in an environment where a major part of the root system is being cut off? But before diving into an investigation of the system and a meditation on potential reforms, I want to offer a disclaimer. My choice to work with European, municipal, federal, and national funding instruments is based on a deep admiration of the phenomenon of publicly funded art. To simplify, citizens, mainly in the post-war era, have agreed for their governments to collect taxes, to pool resources, in order to, among other things, fund the activity of artistic knowledge production as a common good. In that sense, the arts have been prioritized as a fundamental right all citizens benefit from, similar to subsidized healthcare, education, or the preservation of national natural treasures. And so, as a cultural worker whose work has been funded in this manner, luckily, and after many years of unsuccessful grant writing, I'm invested with this awareness. This makes me reflect on my practice as part of a greater societal mechanism. It affects my understanding of what art is, what is my role in it, and how I do my job working with other stakeholders. The second disclaimer I would like to offer, which is obvious and superfluous to say in this forum, but I feel needs to be stated, is that there is no money without invested interests, no matter if it is donated by philanthropic foundations, public funding, angel investors, or Patreon. And so in that sense, the choice of working within the publicly funded art sector is not fueled by the common misled belief in the freedom of the arts. Furthermore, public funding in the European context is, of course, the product of a long history of colonialism and extractivist capitalism, as was also well deconstructed in one of MoneyLab's board members' book, Max Haven's Art After Money, Money After Art. Now, after these words of praise for this phenomenal system of publicly funded art, which very rarely gets any, I want to go back to the questions we want to raise here today. How can we keep advantages European national democracies achieved in supporting cultural production and artistic research while rethinking the institutions which facilitate these? Can we imagine new institutions which re-articulate the power relations between them, government, gatekeepers, and us, artists, cultural workers, cultural institutions, and the public? Can government share power with its citizens without falling down the rabbit hole of populism? Can we find inspiration in the democratization facilitated by decentralization technologies to upgrade the systems we are part of? And lastly, how do we not reproduce the existing indifference and animosity towards public funding of the arts while maintaining sufficient independence where artistic knowledge production can flourish? The answer to all of these questions seem to be a transition towards a public governance system fundamentally based on values of care and reciprocity, which is designed to maintain the health of the art commons. And now I'm handing it over to Eric.
Thanks, Yael. This is such a powerful survey of the situation of the public funding in the arts. So maybe just let me add a few side notes, because basically this is quite a monster to tackle, a monstrous task to tackle, to try to reform or to transform a system that has been existing for so many years. So what we want to foster, what we want to grow and cultivate are new senses of and for the commons, prospective organs of and for the commons to cohere collectively in new ways. Can we imagine ways of funding milieus rather than individuals? Is UBI the only solution? Yael and I met around a project that tries to transform the way we conceive of funding in the performing arts called the Sphere, inspired by the recent innovation in the field of distributed ledger technologies, blockchain, and peer-to-peer contributive economies. The Sphere is about facilitating processes of self-organization and initiating new funding strategies. The project is just one example among many of how artists are getting involved in the blockchain space and are generating different types of cooperative endeavors with an artistic tool set. The Sphere, speaking from experience here, is funded, luckily so, by a Creative Europe grant. And somehow, by investing in us, Creative Europe is perhaps hoping to renew its own mode of funding for the arts. We don't really know. They haven't told us, but still, we're happy.
Eric, I just wanted to jump in and say that I don't think that people see your screen.
Sorry, I thought you did.
Am I right? I'm not 100% sure, maybe.
That's it. I thought can we have a confirmation from the tech side? Yeah, I think we do, actually. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so yes, cheers to the grant writers. I can't even start describing the strange and wonderful geniuses, the genius of the people who have assisted us in interfacing with the bureaucratic requirements of Creative Europe. So, trying to be a bit meta-reflexive here, but like basically the joke among us is that grant writing is an art form in itself, or it has become an art form in itself. And that maybe is symptomatic of the type of problem that Yael was pointing at before. So the irony hasn't escaped us. I guess that's one of the many reasons why, as we try to imagine new ecologies of funding for the arts, we playfully coalesce around the idea of Staatskunst, which is probably my favorite German word. Staatskunst roughly translates as statecraft or the art of governing, but the word also suggests something like state art, of which the art of grant writing is no doubt one of the greatest expression. The Staatskunst of grant writing is necessary for the time being, but what if we want to go beyond art creation via grants to enter the realm of self-created economies? From the Staatskunst of nation states to novel ecologies of funding, generating new types of incentives to create modes of collaboration, up to the challenges raised by the Anthropocene. So how do we do this? Is it a vain dream? Are the current institutions, with all their imperfections, the lesser evil we should learn to live with for better and for worse? It is really interesting to observe how the promises of blockchain have triggered a new institution building imaginary. Blockchains, to put it succinctly, are governance-making machines. The protocol is the institution. And as such, they allow for the formation of all sorts of digital membranes, economic enclosures, and eventually, or hopefully, beyond enclosures, new types of digital commons or commons 3.0. In the Utopia of Rules, David Graeber writes, all bureaucracies are to a certain degree utopian, in the sense that they propose an abstract ideal that real human beings can never live up to. So again, I really like how Graeber is kind of like reversing the table here. I like that he presents the state as actually animated by an utopia, by a certain form of aspiration. It's not about the irrealist blockchain dreamers against the realpolitik of the state. No, the state also dreams, and that is something we need to explore. This is basically what brought us here today. Some sort of ethnographic desire to understand better how the current system is functioning, which is also to say what the current system is dreaming of. This question matters because only who dreams can accept the modification of its dream. This is a formula from Isabelle Stengers that I really like, which is kind of a methodology for if we want to engage in fruitful conversation about transforming the ecology that we are evolving in, we need to address ourselves from the point where there is a potential for modification. But for that to happen and not to be jaded on each other's in each other positions, well, we need to feel a little bit what our aspiration and dreams are about. One last thing here, because we are at the MoneyLab. So it's a quote that has been really inspiring for me over the last few years as I'm exploring the blockchain space. So it's coming from Geert Lovink, and it expresses the experimental and somehow fighting spirit gathering us today. So he writes, one thing is clear, the time for merely complaining about one's precarity is over. We need not only to demand to be paid, we need to push for drastic measures in change of governance, on top of and in combination with new models for small networked units to generate income. This is the age of monetary experimentation.
Right, and I think there is a question if we can share the document that we are reading from. I think we will discuss this after, and maybe this can share it in the recording of the event. I'm not sure. Eric, do you have a proposition here?
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay. I'm extremely honored to introduce into to our conversation now somebody that knows a lot about cultural policy making. So we invited Janina Benduski to talk about the interface between the community of independent performing arts cultural workers and cultural policymaking. Since 2009, Janina has been a member of the board of LAFT. LAFT is a Berlin state association for the independent performing arts. She is also the co-founder of Ehrliche Arbeit, a production collective for the independent performing arts. She is a program director of the Performing Arts Program Berlin, an initiative for the structural strengthening, professionalization, and networking of the independent performing arts in the city. And since 2016, she has been directing the Performing Arts Festival. In November 2015, she became the chairwoman of the BFDK, the Federal Association of the Independent Performing Arts. Janina, I think now we are moving to the conversation part. Aeon, if you don't mind changing the screen view to a gallery view for everyone, so we can feel a little bit less blocked in our little cubes.
Yeah, just give us a second. Okay. I think now it's working.
Okay, right.
I think it's working.
Yeah, it's working.
It's working right now.
I think I see you. Yes.
Okay, because I really don't see.
Yeah, maybe you go
somehow.
You go in view and click gallery view.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I have like 3 different screens on my. Okay. Janina. So maybe you can first share a bit of background about LAFT. So people in the audience who are joining yesterday, there were people from all over the world. So to get a little bit of understanding, and who is represented by this organization? What are some of its main missions? And what is maybe the internal governance structure? Just very shortly insights. And also maybe an insight into what led to its emergence.
Thank you, Yael, for having me here and also for getting engaged in that sort of communication about cultural advocacy, because I think it's not addressed often enough. Right at the moment, I'm in the middle of a preparation of things going on around the World Theatre Day, which is also today. So there are a lot of things happening at the moment, but I'm glad to be here and to be talking to you. What can I tell you about the LAFT Berlin? The LAFT Berlin has been founded in 2008 or 2007, we're never sure. It was a group of artists who actually decided that there was no voice raised in the topics that were interested to them. So regarding the organization of the independent performing arts in Berlin, regarding the funding system, regarding social security status of artist workers. So they decided that there was no organization that is actually representing their issues, and so they decided to form one. So what do you do in Germany? You found an association, which is the eingetragener Verein. So that's really sort of where everybody who has a certain criteria can become a member. They elect the board of representatives, and then there's a juristic form of the Verein. And I think the Verein is really typical for Germany. So what do? You found a Verein. And up to today, the Verein has 420 members. And it's not individuals only, it's also all the venues of the independent performing arts scene, and also the bigger companies or groups or collectives. So there are some members which you might know even in other parts of the world, like the Radialsystem or the Haus or the Fienseele, all the bigger venues of the performing arts. They are members of the association, and also companies like the Mini Protocol or Shishi Pop or Gobsquad, or everyone is members of the association. The criteria is you are professionally working in the performing arts field in Berlin, and you are not publicly owned. So it's only private organization forms in the juristic sense. So Staatstheater like the Staatsoper or the Deutsche Theater in Berlin, they're not allowed to become regular members. They could become associated members to support the association. And actually the Parkau Berlin, for example, the big children and youth theater is also an association member. We don't have any money at all by ourselves, except for the membership fees. So people pay a little bit of money into the association to support it. And we use that money to organize cultural political discourse. So we try to organize working groups, do little small events where people get into contact, raise opinions, and write papers. It's a lot of paperwork because what is not written is not counting in cultural advocacy. So you have to write it, you have to put it onto paper so that you can give it to decision makers inside the administration and the policy sphere. We do get fundings ourselves. Because also, besides the political work, we decided quite early that we want to help people who are actually working in the field, that we really want to offer also counseling or just a little bit of workshops and to help people how to better improve their working atmosphere. And so we decided to apply for funding ourselves for those kind of help that we can offer. So that's where the Performing Arts program came into existence. That's also mostly European funds. So it's the European Fund for Regional Development and the European Social Fund. So it's not artistic funds, it's about funds for structural work. And those are quite complicated, but we managed to do it. So we run our projects by project money ourselves. So we also know inside the organization, we know quite well what it means to write grants, what it means to get the funding and to do the proper paperwork that comes along with it. The LAFT Berlin, and then I stopped talking, we also engage in other networks. Because as Yael told you, there is a strong networking also with the other art forms here in Berlin. So there is a coalition of independent arts, where we work together also with the people from the literature or with the people from the visual arts or the music regarding issues that are common questions for all of us. And we are a member of the Federal Association, as Yael told you, where I'm also president of. So the Federal Association combines all the regional associations of Germany, like with the Bavarian, the Hamburgian, North Rhine-Westphalia. We're working together on the federal level. And that's where we start talking about the complexity of the systems, because it's a big country and we have a federalistic system also of cultural fund distribution. So local, communal level, regional, state level, which in our case is Berlin. So you would be in the region of Mitte in the Supermarkt, and then in the state of Berlin and in the Federal Republic of Germany. And in all three levels, there are funding mechanisms that are quite working differently. So you do get a lot of special insights after all these years in cultural discourse, but I could not say I've understood it all.
You could not say if you what? Sorry, I didn't understand the last sentence.
I can really not say that anybody is able to understand it all. So because you have all those levels, sure. all such like different systems. You have the regional, the states, the national, the European level. I haven't started on international funding structures so far. I don't know if they exist. They should be there. But no, it's so complex in its complexity. And I do so well understand the wish for a solution. And after all these years, I started a little bit doubting that there is a solution in the way of one solution. But now we can start talking.
Yes, amazing. We are already diving in. Eric?
Yeah, maybe I would follow up with another contextual question with regards to the situation that we're in right now. It's with like 1 year in COVID times, it's been like a real hard blow on artists and especially live art artists. So I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit with us what you've been involved in and how LAFT is faring in these difficult times.
Yeah, it's been a hard year, I think, for all of us. And it's been a hard year also for association working in cultural advocacy, because there has been a lot of discussion. There has been also a lot of emergency programs. And the discussion is still going on about how this is working and how we can help the life arts to survive in the crisis. I think Berlin is better off than most regions. Let's put it this way, because we have a strong interest of the city of Berlin and also of the Cultural Senate in the situation of the artists. The city knows that a lot of the Berlin infrastructure is actually depending on the creative industries, tourism, the artworks, that the Berlin identity also is a little bit constructed of these fields of work. So, and we have a quite engaged Kultursenator. So Klaus Lederer is actually really engaged for supporting the sector. So the Berlin situation is better than in a lot of other cities worldwide. I think I've learned at least two things. First of all, there's really an urgent need to talk about the questions of social security versus artistic funding. So, because there has been a lot of confusion regarding these two areas. There was inside the Republic of Germany, there has not been a proper answer regarding the problems of the Solo-Selbstständigen, like the small freelancers, and to help them coming through the crisis. And because that has not happened, artistic funding systems has somehow the responsibility of securing social security has drifted to the artistic funding system, which is actually a question of social security measures. And so we got a big confusion about what is actually what is the main responsibility of an artistic funding? Is it really to secure social security of the single persons, or is it funding artworks or the production of artworks? First, so that is something we will have to talk about a lot in the future to change maybe some. I don't see the answer at the moment. I just see the question. And the second thing is that, how to say that? Because of these questions, there has been a lot of things being done in the grant system. There's a lot more of grants inside the system because a lot of people answered with grants. So, for example, in North Rhine-Westphalia, there has been 15,000 grants of 8,000 euro for artistic workers. And so all these people received that. Here also in Berlin, we had an 18 million special money giving by grants to the artistic community. So for the first time, people are actually paid for what they normally do unpaid. Research, preparation, so for the first time, a large number of people get money via the grant system. And nobody knows what's happening now. Because it has never happened before in this large amount of numbers. So we will learn a lot of what a grant system really means to artists, because we will really see what kind of results will result from the way of working that has been changed considering 2 years before. Maybe those two questions.
I think that this actually touches exactly. I mean, I think the subject of UBI, right, like universal basic income, is completely standardized already in the conversations amongst artists, and it has been already present before the crisis. And I think now it goes without saying, right? It's always like the underlying assumption is like we should be going towards UBI, and that would be sort of like the solution, and also would be able to make maybe a stronger differentiation between, as you said, artistic funding and subsidizing social existence. And but otherwise, this is a differentiation that is quite difficult to make for artists who are, as I said at the beginning, who are not artists that are bound to objects, right? They're not like visual artists that produce paintings or sculptures. So there's not this like end monetization, financialization of their work, but actually the processes are what needs to be subsidized and supported. And the processes is life, is basically their life. And so I think it's a really interesting situation that counterintuitively in Germany, the Corona situation actually brought that very strong to the forefront and made it very clear that there needs to be a transition towards funding processes rather than products. At least, I mean, I would say at least in the performing arts, but that's, I think, true also for other art sectors as well. Because the grants, like the scholarships or stipendiums are not only for, they were not only for the performing arts. So maybe like to follow up on that, so as you said, like there's a pretty good open channel of communication with local government. And we just wondered, like, from your experience, what are some of the hurdles and challenges in translating the needs of the community that LAFT represents to policymakers?
Maybe I can raise a few questions also about funding structures itself, because I think that also reflects in our communications. The first thing I'd say you have to think of is the question of complexity versus accessibility, let's say, put it this way, because also artists and everybody who's working in the art sphere is always asking for a certain really specialized type of funding for a certain way of working. So the circus people want something else than the puppet people. And you need something else for a venue than for single artists. So we have a really differentiated system of funding structures that become so very complex that people who are new to the systems do not understand it. And so they demand simplicity. So we are constantly driven between the need of a differentiated, complex system of funding structure that really has an answer for every need versus a reduction onto a single system that is understandable by all and accessible by all. And that's two poles of this discussion that is really hard to combine also for ourselves, because our membership has, of course, all the single views. So we have the really large structures who say we need experts who know what we are doing, who can actually judge what we are doing, who can decide on how much money is in the system. And we have the single artists who say, I do not understand this at all. What are you doing? Can't we have like a more accessible approach to the money? And both sides are right. And that's really the hard thing for an advocacy association, to combine those sort of situations and to give this complex way of the single voices of the community over to the next level. So most what we do, I think, is translation. The second thing that we do in this area is, and that is quite important, is transferring knowledge about the way the system works. Because so often people complain about a certain situation, or they complain about not getting money. And to say that really in a really clear way, I do understand the complaint, but sometimes I ask, what have you asked for in what grant system? And then they tell me where I have asked for money for traveling to Norwegian. And I said, well, in this program, there's written no traveling costs. So there is no need to ask them for that, because but the person did not know this before. And I think that is a really, that's a simple example for a bigger problem, that the way of getting knowledge about how the system works is not accessible enough for everybody. So you do not get enough insight into the structures and the power structures behind the structures. And as long as you don't know how the system works, you cannot participate. And that's something that we really like to do, that we like to strengthen we like to give people more knowledge about how the system works, so that it's less emotional and more in a way of informed frustration, and then the frustration can be turned into political work. And that's really what I believe in. Personally, at the moment, I'm more interested into funding criteria than into funding decision structures. Because I think the criteria is the thing that comes before the decision. Because first of all, you have to decide in a democratic society based on what criteria you want to distribute the money for the arts. So is it about a big audience? Is it about the best innovative artwork? Is it about the structures of the art institutions, how the people are treated that are work inside the institutions? Is it about developing a bit more diverse, a more fair, a more inclusive artwork? And those are the criteria that you have to clarify in before. And then afterwards, there is somebody who's making the decision, either a jury or a democratic system or an expert or whatever. But I think the part of finding the right criteria for me actually is more, at the moment personally, more interesting than how to make the decision based on this criteria. And the last thing, it's still about how much money is available in the end. And I think as long as we try to discuss based on a basis of need and on frustration because there's just not enough money in the system, we will not find the next level. So It's still about getting more money into the system.
Right. I'm so happy. Sorry, Eric. I just want to comment for a moment, because I'm so happy you brought up the question of criterions, because I think within the blockchain world, there is a lot of work around system design, right? And quadratic voting, for example, it's kind of like hyped and explored as this invention where voting can be not only about yes and no questions, but also about the intensity and quality and so on, which are very basic, I think, considerations or criterions in the existing system. The existing system, when like a jury sits in front of an application of an artist, there are so many super complex considerations that go into the criterions. And I think that there is a lot of intransparency about that. And there's very little discussion around around that aspect of the system. And maybe also a question of inviting the communities that are supported by these systems to really engage in the conversation around what are these criterions? What would you like your work, or what would you consider valid criterions to evaluate your work according to? I don't know, maybe these can be like starting points. And I'm saying this also for us when we are designing and thinking about our experiments, right? It's like we're all doing experiments, trying to maybe find some kind of solutions, partial solutions, of course. And then, and I think that there was an interesting case study that we ran into while preparing actually for this event. And for me, it was interesting that in Estonia, there is this, totally hyped, all the governance is transitioned to like e-governance, and they are also like advocates for other countries in the European Union and outside of moving to e-governance. And there is an interesting difference between e-governance and e-democracy. And they are making that differentiation and saying, like, we're dealing right now with, just translating the existing bureaucratic system into, like automation and so on. And then they do say that there is a discussion around e-democracy. So like, that's like the next level that we need to reach in our like where we're aiming for, also within the digital sphere. What does it mean? It's not only about automation. It's not only about simply taking the existing systems we have and making them more effective. It's also about rethinking the way that things work. That was just a comment for me. Eric, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I don't know if Janina wants to comment on that.
I again lost the view of the...
Yeah, now we have Robin.
Yes.
Yeah, this beautiful interactive diagramming. So
maybe, yeah.
yes,
Go
Janina.
ahead. No, please go ahead.
Maybe if you want to answer to what Yael said, and then I can follow up.
Yeah, I think I agree. Because I think this is a question that I meant with regarding criteria and versus decision making. And I think that the EU government, like also how a grant is applied for, how a grant is like, how the decisions, the information is collected, is already on its way to the e-government solution. And that will not, it will not help at all, but it will also not hinder at all to discuss about a democratic way of finding criteria and making decisions. It's just not the same question. So, yeah, I agree. I just wanted to invite you all because there's one thing I've forgotten. Because of the crisis, there is a little bit more money for evaluating funding systems. Okay. So right at the moment, there are quite some scientists on the federal level. There's a small board of experts run by the Fonds Darstellende Künste, and where we are also a part of a small study of 12 studies regarding the funding system. And also the cultural political aspects of like what is, for example, a Kulturentwicklungsplan. I don't really know how to say that in English. It's a German word, how to make a planning for cultural development of a region. So, and also how this is working and how we want to improve with that. And there will be a big conference in September, starting 14th to 16th of September, where we will have first results of this studies presented here in Berlin at the here in Berlin. I don't know if the venue is confirmed yet. So everybody is invited to join us there at the Bundesforum and to have a look at the funding systems in Germany at the moment of the crisis and how they have improved or how they have not improved and what needs to be done in the future.
So I really appreciate and find fascinating part of what you were describing in terms of like how you act as an interpreter of the system itself. And I guess my question, like addressed to you as a cultural diplomat, is how do you navigate between what I understood LAFT mission? LAFT is independent with regards to the state apparatus, but at the same time, you are spending so much time interpreting and interfacing with the system's affordances. So there's a moment, I mean, I don't want to bring it to a too personal level, like how much you feel like the state is creeping in you, but like, how do you negotiate that boundary? And also maybe on the other end, what type of trust building mechanism is being created over time? Because I guess you have proven to be an interlocutor of value for the state.
Yeah, well, the thing is, sometimes both sides don't like you. If you want to hear that on a personal level, that like the dramatic situation of a translator is always that you go like on the other side and to the other side, and both sides say, "Hey, what are you saying?" So, but that's okay. I mean, it's still a sort of it's not my. I try to on the personal level. I try to see that work as a sort of a dramatic figure and not as a personal human being. So, and I think that helps a lot in political work in whatever aspect you're on your way. But so I don't feel engaged as a person. But there are some small rules that I actually agree on with myself and also with other people. So I don't do artistic jury work. I just don't do it because it would be changing the sites again, and I can start doing it if so I don't do curational work myself. I don't. So also in my projects, we have people who are actually choosing the program of the main events, and so I don't do this myself. So that's first rule. Second rule is stick to the truth. It's quite easy. Be polite, but stick to the truth and say if you don't like it. So and surprisingly, most people like this. also, and I think that a lot of artists, a lot of also artistic associations, a lot of cultural political associations are not aware that it's completely okay to say what they think, as long as they do it in a polite way. I think there's a lot of also this myth of you have to write something else in your grant than what you want to do. It's in most systems, I know it's just not true. The juries and also the decision makers, they want to read what you want to do. And the plain speaking is of more use than most people think. I don't know if that was a question.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe add because trying to imagine new ecologies of funding, new relations with the state, and we know like it's such a thorny issue because then what if it's not the state funding, then what is it going to be? And then like for so many art expression, there's no market for them. But like one thing that I have in mind is like how like the question of independence, basically, like how is that relation built between the state? Like, would you accept if in the future the state says, hey, we want to unload a little bit like a big society English style. We want to unload part of our responsibilities when it comes to funding. Would you guys accept to take up the responsibility of distributing this fund so that they don't have to bear that responsibility? Would LAFT, for instance, accept such challenge, or like would that threaten the independence of the organization?
Well, first of all, I think that there is a big discussion how much distribution of money a critical association should do. Some of the other regional associations of Germany, for example, in Nordrhein-Westphalia, also in Hamburg, they are distributing funds, but not really like the big ones, but the smaller ones mostly, like the projects funds and not the structural funds. The LAFT Berlin so far has decided not to distribute funds because we like to be the adversary, like the critical part outside of the system. And we think that inside a crisis, of course, everybody has to help. So I think we would be ready to distribute emergency funds, but in a structural way of thinking, we think it's quite nice that there is one association distributing the funds and one association criticizing the association distributing the funds. But so this association could also not be the state itself. I mean, for example, we do have a Projektfonds Kulturelle Bildung that is run by a Stiftung, as like cultural education funds that is run by a Stiftung, which is not the state of Berlin itself. And they also run the Projektfonds Urbane Praxis about like works in the urban sphere of Berlin, which is quite new. And that is a Stiftung. The Stiftung is owned by the state, but still it's a different structure. And I think sometimes it's quite a good idea to think about a decentralized system of funding. And it might also be possible that the artist itself, represented by an association like ours, can become part of a structure that is distributing the funds. So that would actually be a really nice image that we would be part of a council, and that council is like controlling is another structure that is distributing the funds. So that is something like maybe also the Kulturstiftung des Bundes on a federal level is something that is actually owned by the state, so owned by the community, but working in a different system and also in a distant control system than like the BKM, the state itself. But that's really a high level of abstract discourse about funding systems. What I really do think is that the check and balance system is really important. So that you really have one side distributing, one side controlling, one side proposing ways of distributing money, and the other side that's saying, no, not this way. And you have to keep on talking, keep on changing, keep on talking. So there's not the one structure that would fit all. Then maybe it's good for 2 or 3 years, and then you have to start talking again because the reality is changing, the world is changing. And so the funding system has to constantly change. And as long as you accept this, you can sort of relax and say, okay, let's go to the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level. And that's not like a hierarchy, but also a try and error of evolving systems. That's the way of the Atmende-Fördersystem at the moment, so the breathing funding system, so that it's not about the fixed structures, but about a fluid and breathing system that is actually evolving. And that's an image that I like.
I think you're describing super important aspects of the complexity, and this is why also I think in the beginning I was saying like there really is a lot. It's very often in our circle of let's say the crypto world and so on, where like the state is very heavily criticized, of course, and there's like a very strong urgency kind of to detach from the state structure and move on to new forms of incorporation. But the complexity, the system from its maturity arrived at maybe still is worth a revisit, right? It's like don't throw away the baby with the water. This is something that we've been saying quite a lot in our project. I guess we're really close to finishing, I think, or am I correct?
Just let me say one thing. I'm still about criticizing the state. It's not about not criticizing it. It's just a question: what is the answer? And I mean, state institutions are democratically controlled, and so I do prefer them to a lot of other structures. And if you see, like, the sort of the TikTok funding for diversity. I mean, they that's a sort of art washing funding system that really makes me mad in the end. And I mean, they give money to artists promoting diversity projects, but they want like 48 videos for the money. 48 videos. So actually what they are doing, they are buying videos for their social media work with not enough money at all, and the project on top. And this is meant to help developing a diverse culture. And that is a sort of, that makes me a lot more angry than other problems. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I still strongly prefer the funded system by the state. Sorry.
Right. I mean, I guess that you were saying about the way that the members of LAFT, like maybe, or generally the members of the independent art team, if they could, nonetheless, we can find a structure in which they have a room to participate in criticizing even the existing system. And I wonder what if LAFT was to imagine in the future, what would be LAFT of the future for I know also working generally with futurability is also criticized in itself, but I wonder nonetheless what would be somewhere that you would think LAFT needs to go.
I mean, I think that in the end, it would be the absolutely nicest image that it wouldn't be needed at all. So it would just disappear because all the problems have been solved. So that's the final utopia of an advocacy association is actually not to exist because it would not be needed anymore. But I think that's impossible at the moment in the capitalistic world. So I think what we have to tackle is, first of all, that most of the work we are doing is not paid at all. So the board is a voluntary board. The work I'm doing outside the project is voluntary work. So it's really to always have your actually way of earning your own money plus the advocacy work. And that has to end in the end. We need to have a small member basis of people who are actually paid for what they are doing, so that can become a stronger structure. And I don't really know how to reach that, but it's really important because otherwise it will always stay weak and vulnerable because it regards on the good intentions of the people who are doing it. So all the cultural political work I do is voluntary work as well. So there is no funded structure to support this sort of advocacy work. Second thing would be, and that's really a little bit linked to the first problem. Second problem would be really how to transfer also the money of advocacy, like the knowledge of how to do advocacy work to other people, because we are so busy of reacting to crises and to fight for the funding system that we don't really have the time to understand, to explain to everybody else how you do that. So how do we give this knowledge to the next generation? Let's say it this way, because this association exists for 13, 14 years by now. So there are people who have learned a lot, and how to give this to a younger generation that starts working at the moment, how to not build up human knowledge resources that do know everything, but are not able to spread their knowledge. Yeah, and the third thing would be how to better get in contact with the other areas of the society. I mean, the artwork is complex in itself, the art sphere, but we do have so many topics that have close relations to other parts of society, like the care workers, the knowledge workers everywhere, like the social security of everyone who's a freelancer. And there are so many topics that need to be addressed outside the artistic bubble, that need to be talked about in all fields of society. And that is something we're at the moment not available to do that, because we don't have the resources. But I'd really love to go on fighting for a better world, and not only for better artwork.
So there is a question, and there is also a diagram that was shared that I think could be interesting to share with everyone. So the question here is from Tobias, who says, I really find so interesting what you're talking about. My English is not just good enough to follow. How do you see yourself acting out of German funding, talking about German funding in English? Which community do you want to address? How do you see yourself excluding people, especially they don't have the English level to discuss it? Well, I mean, my apology, because I'm definitely one of the culprits here. I mean, MoneyLab is an international conference gathering people from all around the world. Yet I really appreciate that we're going granular in the structure of funding here in Germany. It was also part of the initial intent that Ella shared with us. If COVID situation was solved by now, we would have had a decentralized event that would have made all these initiatives, post-capitalist initiatives, appear on the map. So maybe this discussion would have happened at Haus der Statistik, and in person, I'm sure we would have been able to accommodate translation issues better. But this is a very welcome point, actually. Especially as an expat that struggles to find time to learn German properly. I don't know if there's an unidentified diagrammer out there that is sharing a diagram. I think we could check it out, and then maybe Robin could present his screen so that we see what he has diagrammed across this whole session. That would be really nice, I think. So let me share my screen, and going back in there. Wait a second, because I need to. Damn it! Wait a second. Open the file. I think now it's going to work better.
Maybe in between I will just...
Is it working now?
No, I think not. Is it? No.
No? Damn it.
I wanted in between also, we actually haven't reached, I'm not sure we will, this session, we haven't managed to reach discussing the commons, actually, the art commons, which was, because basically the commons would be a political structure that that answers a lot of the issues that we've been exploring here. And I just wanted to know in which way does that strategy is that in any way present in the kind of underlying mission of LAFT? Is that articulated to policymakers? Because I do know that in LAFT there were a lot of events that actually dealt with collaborative work and commoning and so on. So.
First of all, regarding the language system, we most times do have the problem the other way around, because most of our events or papers are actually in German. So most of our information work is taking part in German. I can talk wenn ich Deutsch rede, wird das Ganze meistens noch komplizierter als auf Englisch, wenn mein Englisch nicht so gut ist. So I see the problem, most of the times I see the problem of transporting all this knowledge to the expats world, who do not understand German.
Interesting.
So we started thinking about what we can translate and what we can also offer in English. And then we noticed that sometimes it's not good if we announce a grant in English, and then people start to look at the information, but then in the end the application is only available in German. So they have a disappointing system is a little bit later. So it does not help them that we let them know that it exists in English if they need perfect German to work on it. So it's really a hard thing of how make this knowledge about this accessible. But in most our cultural political discourse events are in German, because also politicians do not speak English in public. They don't like to speak English in public. So I really invite you to other events of LAFT Berlin that are mostly taking part in German, and where we try to have sometimes try to have a translation, a whispering translation into English. So it's actually hard for me to talk English about this topic, because it's such a German framework, and a lot of the words don't have proper official translation into English. So, but that was not the question, but I think it's an interesting part of accessibility also about the language system. I don't really know how to answer this question, to be honest. I like thinking about the structures of organizations. I mean, you in the beginning you talked a little about that I do have different spheres of work. So in the Ehrliche Arbeit, it's really a collective in the absolute radical sense of the word. The LAFT is an association, so it has a certain form set of rules governing that association. And the projects I work in, like the festival and the performing arts program, there are project-funded structures that really have to follow also with the regulations of the money. So I just try to experiment with the forms of organization. And I think as long as everybody agrees on that, we try to take care of each other in the structures we work on, and that we try to make things, how things are working inside the association as transparent as possible, then it's not the one choice I would make for the future of an association. But maybe I did not understand the question.
So I don't know if you could see the screen that I shared before, but otherwise let's move maybe to Robin. You've been following the discussion, and I see you've acted your magic. I don't know if you'd like to walk us through the rendering that you gave around the participatory governance.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So maybe the tech support can just spotlight me for everyone, so the image is a bit larger. Yeah, it was interesting listening to your conversation, especially in the context of this conference. So I think that was also a little bit the lens that I was having, and really looking at the more systemic issues. You've been talking a lot, of course, about the funding system of arts, but yeah, I was kind of like listening more to the deeper kind of themes of how can we actually participatory design a new system that is so like together in the bottom of the image, the people like holding a new structure or system that can enable new ways of supporting each other. And So I was really listening solution focused. I think there was a lot of emphasis also on the problem. I think I haven't really noted that down. I'm sorry, but I was really looking. Okay, what values do we need in such a new system? How could that look like? Picking up words like social security, sharing knowledge, inclusion, accessibility. And then out of that, maybe designing new social systems, which I think this whole conference is about, especially on the monetary side. Yeah, that's basically the essence of what I got. Thank you guys for sharing all of that. I give it back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Robin, for emphasizing that. I mean, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I really think that you're focused on the fact that it's not only enough to think about like what this system that we're thinking about needs to look like, but the way that system will come into existence, even to begin with, might be a much more an earlier question that we all need to ask, and like how can we organize to collectively imagine a dream about what is this. And I think that we focused on the problematization because also maybe a little bit to reflect where the system is currently, because of the need to answer to very immediate needs and the survival kind of state in which we are existing, and these organizations like LAFT functioning in. And there, the space for dreaming and the even engaging with ideas of where do we want to go takes a back seat. I think this is very well pointed at. I'm going to turn off my microphone because my dog is barking for a moment.
Now I see the image. I have not seen it before, but okay, I see the image. Yeah.
A very nice breathing diagram here that I think summarized pretty nicely the spirit of this conversation. I'm really, really happy, Janina, that you accepted our invitation. I think it's super fruitful, and I'm thinking here for the people that are on the monetary system design, people that are very much interested in the arts, sometimes in different ways. I don't know if the NFT wind blew all the way to you, but it's been a big topic on this side of the world, and it's good, I think, for people that are not so familiar with the art world to understand that it goes much beyond the commodification of artworks themselves. If we want to have a real impact on the ecosystem of art funding, so really, thank you very much. It was really, really appreciated.
So thanks for having me here, and also thank you for addressing the topic, because I think it's quite important that people do speak a lot about how the money is distributed, because really it is a society, it's also a responsibility of the society to talk about it, and not only of the artists to talk about it. So if people from other spheres come together also to think about it, that's more than welcome. I will just put the link to the performing arts program into the chat, because for everybody who's now wondering, how do I get help if I try to find my way into the funding system, the performing arts program has a Beratungsstelle, so that's really where a lot of workshops and also individual counseling is possible for people who are trying to understand the grant system for their own artwork, because we've been talking on such a meta level regarding cultural advocacy. So if people were actually looking to explanations how to get funding, that's better there. And there's a large program of workshops and offers for help. So thanks for having me here. And I will try to talk Italian next, so I get completely confused into the languages today.
Thank you so much. We look forward to our next conversations. Maybe.
Next conversation. Maybe we can also continue that conversation on the on the industry get together or wherever.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Yael, Eric.
Thanks, Janina.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone for joining us as well today.